Auckland Marathon organisers are betting on the event going ahead despite the double dilemma of uncertainty around COVID alert levels and Harbour Bridge repairs potentially forcing changes to the iconic route. The country, excluding Auckland, moves to level 1 tonight. The super city shifts to level 2 on Wednesday at 11:59pm, with a decision on a further drop not until October the 5th. The Auckland Marathon on November the 1st can only be run at level 1. But the marathon organiser, the Ironman Group, says hundreds of thousands of dollars in event-related costs is due to be paid before the next crucial decision on alert levels. Director of Ironman Oceania, Beeche, reckons the whole thing's a massive gamble.
I guess it's a move in the right direction, and it's a good indication with the rest of the country going to level 1 and Auckland taking a little step forward. But it still makes planning this incredibly difficult. We've got to commit to several $100,000 worth of expenditure in the next 2 weeks before the next deadline of 5 October. So we're really in a holding pattern still. Hoping that things are going to continue to move in the right direction.
So, Dave, to be blunt, do you have to pay your money and take your chance here?
Yeah, to be honest, it is a bit like it's a bit of a gamble because all our suppliers, there's a massive amount of infrastructure and people that go in behind an event of this scale, and they can't just organise it on 2 weeks' notice. They need commitments. They've got to organise their own staff and equipment, etc. So, it is a bit of a gamble. I guess for me, it points to the need for an overall framework. Like where we've come from for the last 6 months is entirely appropriate. Blanket restrictions, simplicity, clear rules. But as we move to a phase where we need to learn to live with this thing, I think we need a framework that allows gatherings to take place under a prescribed COVID management framework. So we're seeing other countries do this. We delivered an event in Queensland 2 weeks ago under an approved COVID management plan that put in place physical distancing, hygiene, contact tracing, screening when people arrived at check-in. They're doing a similar thing in the UK. Gatherings there are limited to 6 people. But they held a run on the weekend for 3,500 with all those types of restrictions in place. So
you're talking about the Kew Garden race that they had over the weekend? Yeah,
that's right. Yep. So 3,500 people were able to safely take part in a race with all those COVID management guidelines in place. And I think as we move through the process of getting used to this virus, I think we now need to get a little more targeted and sophisticated and weigh up the risks associated with each type of event. We all know how important events are to society, physical, mental health, community health, economic benefits, all the rest of it. And we now need to put in place a system which allows events where we're comfortable we can mitigate the risk so that they can proceed under some of these higher alert levels. Level 1's fine, we're good, all events can proceed. But it's when we're bouncing around between these other alert levels, between 2 and 3 or 1 and 2, it's that level of uncertainty that it makes planning and delivering these events very, very difficult.
The thing is, we know that in a kind of sweaty environment, which is running definitely is, and with a lot of people, and if you just take the Auckland Marathon, you're there at the start, right? You're all rammed in there like sheep in a drafting race, and then you're all kind of slobbering over the drink station at various points along the way. I mean, how do you deal with all of that?
Yeah, so look, I mean, for one, the risk associated with outdoor events is, according to the scientists, a lot lower than indoor events. So you've already mitigated a huge amount there. And I'm not saying there isn't a pathway for indoor events here either. I think what we need to do is actually step back and go, what are the factors that need to be taken into account with these events? Outdoor, ticketed, unticketed, and then, like the Kew Gardens race in the UK, for example, there's a very clear guideline on how runners are to behave during the event and the minimum distance of 1.5 metres per athlete. They stretch the start waves out over a much longer period of time. They redesigned their entire aid stations so that people weren't slobbering over their drinks and had a whole lot of hygiene guidelines around spitting and things like that. So, and apparently, look, I didn't see the race myself, but apparently it went exceptionally well. So there are, as people get used to living in a COVID world, there are things that you can do to help mitigate the risk.
How late can you leave the decision in terms of the Auckland race?
We've got to decide, first of all, whether we proceed from this point, whether we can, in fact, hang on to 5 October. I think we probably will, but we've just got to finish up our risk assessment on that. But then we will be hanging on every word on the 5th of October to see if we're going to move to level 1 on the 7th. And then if that's the case, then will be all systems go. But look, in the meantime, I think we're probably going to continue to plan as if the race is going to go ahead and just look to mitigate our financial risk over the next couple of weeks as we can.
Worst case scenario, could you postpone? Do you have a rain or COVID day as such?
No, we've already looked at that. The event calendar, finding dates is incredibly challenging, and you need to kick it a certain distance away. But again, without this framework that we're advocating for to ensure that events can continue while we're bouncing around between these levels, you need to be looking at least 6 months down the track, and then you're almost into the next edition of the event next October. So, no, if we can't deliver it on 1 November, then the event will be cancelled.
So I got to ask, can you are you insured for this? Because it's a pandemic. So if you do have to can it.
No, it's just straight off the bottom line. So,
So that money's circling the drain pipe, to put it bluntly.
Exactly. And then you throw a Harbour Bridge challenge in the midst of it. So,
well, soon as you go there, Dave, let's go there. Okay, so the Harbour Bridge, we got a pandemic and now we got a bridge with some structural issues. Where does that leave you to? What if they told you about that?
Yeah, look, we're working through closely with AT and some of the other agencies on the timeline on that. So we know as much as you know at the moment. But I guess the positive news on that is we have always had a contingency plan in place for a scenario where we couldn't access the bridge. For example, if there was a big crash on the bridge the night before the race, etc. So we do have a contingency course ready to go. So the bridge won't be a factor on whether the event can proceed or not, but it may affect the course.
And let's be honest, Dave, that's the reward, isn't it? Panting your way over the bridge.
The bridge is a pretty cool part of the race, that's for sure. So, look, while it would be disappointing, I think, anyone who's been training for these races and with the number of event cancellations there have been out there, I think people will just be grateful that the event can actually take place if we manage to get it up, with the COVID regulations.
And again, hate to ask it, but Queenstown, if Auckland's still at level 2 and Queenstown's at level 1, are you going to be forced to tell all the, it's coming, all the Auckland runners, thanks but no thanks?
Look, we're hoping we're going to have to avoid that. To be honest, I've got my head in the sand on that one a little bit. It's a pretty difficult situation for an event organiser to be in, and I do sympathise with the position the Rotorua Marathon were in last week, having to make that call. And again, it seems quite... you get some peculiar outcomes when the regulations are like this, where you've got split levels.
But that's the decision you're going to have to make, isn't it, Dave? Whether the Aucklanders are in or out, if the levels are separate.
Yeah, although, again, I don't think it's reasonable to place that on an event organiser. I mean, Aucklanders could travel to Rotorua or Queenstown anyway. They can eat in bars and drink in restaurants and so forth. And it seems a little peculiar to me that the responsibility is being put on events to decide whether people can or can't enter their event when they can travel there anyway. So we'll decide how we're going to handle it. We may put that responsibility on the individual athlete themselves, or we may follow the path that the Rotorua Marathon did and exclude Auckland entrants. But we'll assess the options on that and make that decision if we have to.
And that's Dave Beeche there discussing, the dilemma and challenges facing the Auckland Marathon.